Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie St. Angelo, and thanks so much for being here. Today's episode is called Leveraging Coaching for Career Growth and Well-Being. And my guest today is Peggy Hogan. She's Purple Inc.'s Vice President of Client Services, and she loves the powerful effect of helping people find joy in their careers. She's got over 20 years of experience in HR and coaching skills to coach individuals seeking career changes and helping people navigate if they've been outsourced, perhaps by the company is downsizing, or maybe they are changing careers midlife, or maybe they need some help transitioning to retirement. Or maybe you're one who's just starting off in your career. Peggy's a graduate of the University of Michigan, and she sits on Indy SHRM Board of Directors as Chair of Workforce Development, and she also volunteers for Dress for Success. I hope you'll stay tuned for this really interesting conversation. Well, this podcast is for you if you know you want to change something. Maybe it is your career, your health, or another aspect of your life, and you might wonder if this is the right stage or age in life to make that change, and you don't know how to start. Or maybe you're one of those people caught in analysis paralysis. I know I was one of you, and I understand. But just stay tuned, because throughout this conversation and all my conversations, you can pick up a little tip here and there and a little step, one little small step that you can take to make a difference. Believe me, I've done that, and I know it works. So stay tuned. You can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, Apple, and Amazon platforms. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into today's episode and meet my guest, Peggy Hogan. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Susie. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, and thank you for being on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm so excited to have you today because career has been a really hot topic for a lot of people, and I've noticed based on the people who've watched my podcast or listened to it that they've tuned in a lot to the episode I did a year or so ago with someone else who was going through a career crossroads. So I'm eager to talk to someone who's a career HR expert. So let's go ahead and, tell the listeners and viewers about yourself and what exactly you do.
Okay, well, thank you. So I work as VP of Client Services at Purple Inc. We do HR consulting, and part of what we do in consulting that is kind of where my background really comes into play is recruiting. So I lead our recruiters. I started very early in my career in recruiting, working for a bank, and then working for a large marketing and advertising agency. And so I have that internal kind of knowledge of what we look for when we're hiring. And then at Purple Inc., we're doing that work for clients. And so, I've been both interviewing people over the years and then serving up candidates to our client companies as well, and hiring managers. So of course I'm hearing their feedback about what they're looking for in candidates. So because of that experience over the years, people just come to you asking for job advice. And I really love having that personal impact on people, because there's so many insider tips that people just don't know. And so I love being able to share them and help them, especially when they're in a job transition that maybe wasn't of their choosing, or the timing wasn't of their choosing. So we do recruiting services. We also do outplacement, which is where the company is hiring us when perhaps they're parting ways with an employer or employees. And then I have people who just are looking and they feel like for whatever reason, they could use some guidance.
Yeah, I would imagine, all those areas are so important. And I talk a lot on this podcast about all these areas that lead to our health and our, our wellness, and our career's a big part of that. And I think it's really important when, you get to talk to a recruit or an employee and talk to them a little bit about what they love to do and what makes them feel good and what they're specializing in and things like that. And I'm sure it can be challenging when you have situations where it isn't of their choosing, or maybe they're going back into the workforce, maybe after a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes we're really expected to kind of follow our passion. And I'm kind of tired of that phrase, if you follow your passion, you won't work a day in your life. Because while it's true, most people don't really know what they're passionate about, especially at an early age. Occasionally you get someone coming out of college who wants to go into med school or they want to be a lawyer. But so many times we're putting this pressure on our young people to know what they're passionate about. They really only know the jobs that their parents have, what they see on TV, what the neighbors have. And so, I love kind of reassuring people that we're here to look at your strengths and, to your point, what are you good at and what's going to be the best fit for you, and then figuring out a path for discovery for that.
And I would imagine, Peggy, that takes a lot of discovery on your part to dig deep and to really ask some questions that potentially could be hard. I don't know if you do testing or if it's more just that interpersonal communication and really getting to know that person. And it certainly, I can't imagine that it could be a one-time thing where you sit down once and you have an idea of where that potential recruit could be headed.
Yeah, it's best if we can have multiple conversations. I know when I start a relationship with a client, I do send them a form where they can do a little bit of, kind of, it's not journaling, but really taking some thoughtful time to write down, what if people complimented you in the past? What have you been the go-to person for? What do you feel your strengths are? And then what are some other deal breakers about a job? Because I might like to do a particular job, like be a chef, but maybe I don't want to work on weekends, or maybe that pay doesn't fit with what my needs are. So there's this matching, first sort of discovering and identifying what you're good at and what some ideal maybe industries or general occupational themes are. And then there's also, we do have to be realistic about what we're bringing. And so I might want to be a psychologist, but if I'm not trained in psychology, no one's going to hire me for that. So then I have to make a decision to go back to school, or what's something sort of adjacent that would have some similar kind of themes or processes that I'd be involved in, or similar type of work.
And so you would have a broad base of all different jobs and industries and obviously a network of your own of where there might be some fits and some natural connections for people. And I want to ask too, what sort of age groups are you seeing now? Are you seeing the full spectrum? Is there a particular age group that you're working with?
Yeah, great question. So the whole spectrum, right out of college, mid-career, people re-entering the workforce, people at the end of their career, who maybe are having to pivot later in their career, I should say, and even people discovering what they want to do in retirement. And so, yeah, all the ages. Having been a recruiter, working with clients, I've seen, I don't even know, thousands of resumes. And so even just seeing different job titles, being curious when we're interviewing people, we learn about their occupations in that way too. And I did kind of forget to respond to what you asked in terms of assessing people. We do have assessments that we do as well. Either career assessments, or we can even do personality assessments. We can look at values and really kind of take all that information into the career coaching process.
And a part of that career coaching, Peggy, does that include, like helping with the resume and helping with the LinkedIn page and things like that, interviewing skills?
So yes, we definitely deal with the resume, but it really depends on what the person's looking for from us. So if someone's coming to me and maybe they already have a job interview that's slated, but they haven't brushed up their resume in a while, it may be that I'm just working with them on their, what we would call their personal branding. So their resume, their LinkedIn profile, anything else that's a part of that, might be cover letters, things like that. A full package often includes this discovery part. What do you want to do? All the way through the personal branding and then interview coaching. So it really depends. Some people feel very comfortable with their resumes, but they feel like they want that preparation. This is a big interview. It's got to go well. I want to go in prepared. We might just do interview coaching for them.
I love that. I love that because that wasn't around when I was deep in the throes of being in a career and switching into another career.
Yeah. And you'll never, ever get real feedback from someone about how you interview who has interviewed you for the job, because they're not going to tell you things that they might feel are hurtful or might put them in some sort of a risk situation. So a career coach can. I always tell my clients, I'm going to point out the broccoli in your teeth if it's there, in a kind and loving way, but I'm here to help make you be successful.
I would think people would really appreciate that feedback and know that you're on their team.
You know what? I do think they do. There have been a few hard ones where I've really had to think about, okay, I'm going to need to broach this subject, and I want to do it in a delicate manner. But, sometimes it might even be about how someone is presenting themselves on a video call or interview, or even sometimes culturally, someone might pick up the phone, in a way that doesn't seem maybe warm. And so pointing that out, hey, did you notice, you kind of picked up that phone saying, hello. And that we might want to pick that up a little bit, because you get there and you get warm. But think about this part of picking up the phone. So,
when you talk about, people just coming out of college that may need your services to, career changes people didn't necessarily want to, end of career or pivoting in retirement. I get a lot of people my age and older and friends who are in that stage. But you've talked about some terminology that I think people who haven't entered the workplace or are re-entering after many years would probably look at you like a deer in the headlights, because they don't know what branding means, and maybe they haven't had a LinkedIn page. And I guess maybe I want to ask you too about addressing social media, and if that's an important component now that maybe hasn't been. Maybe someone needs to maybe clean up their social media page for the employer.
You might, right? So social media, of course, look at your settings, see who you're connected to. Don't post anything that you wouldn't want someone to see in this highly charged political environment that we're in right now. That could be a deal breaker, or you might, not get interviews for a certain role. But really, even beyond that, let's say that you're, involved in your faith community a lot and you're volunteering at your church. If that's who you are and that's authentic to you, then keep it on your resume. And you want to work in a place that's going to embrace you as you are, but also be aware that it could be cutting you out of things. Or if you're involved with a political party, same thing. You just have to be aware of that. But yeah, if you're doing shots of tequila, like LinkedIn is not the place to post that, or Facebook, or probably anywhere.
Yeah, good point. But sometimes you have to be obvious with people, because they don't think it's a problem, or I think we're in a different space now where there's more analysis, and I think an employer is going to be more observant and look at all those components, and that's just my thought that they are.
Yeah, for sure. And LinkedIn, you want your LinkedIn to reflect what is on the resume and the resume to reflect what's on the LinkedIn. So if you decide to take a job off your resume, but you didn't take it down off LinkedIn, that's going to create some questions. And even if we think of just LinkedIn as sort of the professional social media channel, if you're posting things that are positive, or if you're posting things that are a little more negative, someone's getting a read on you and they're making a judgment. Or if you're posting subject matter expertise, that can be really helpful too.
Right. Right. Gosh, I remember the early days of LinkedIn, and we were just sort of trying to figure it out and work with it. And then it's taken on really a life of its own, and it is a awesome way to connect. If you know someone that you want to connect with, and you're already connected by another person, I mean, there's many ways to utilize it. You can also say that you're searching for a job. You can talk about how you've acquired a job. I mean, there's just so many things about that tool, I think, has come a long way.
It has. And I have noticed a big surge of people saying that they are in the job market. Hey, I'm going to be looking for a new role. A few years ago, we really didn't see that. And people didn't want to really broadcast that. It's also important that your settings on LinkedIn are good and open in the way that you want to be open so that you can be found by recruiters too.
Absolutely. And what about resumes these days? There was the time when a one-page resume was all that you should share. But then, as someone my age, I can't do a one-page resume. If I wanted to send one out, that just would not even be possible.
I think it's entirely appropriate for someone who has a wealth of experience to have a 2-page resume. And we just really want to, I consider it expensive real estate. So you want the things that you want to do more of highlighted, and not, don't be highlighting that you can work a cash register if you have no desire to ever work a cash register again. Or take those jobs. I was a bank management trainee and in banking, and every time I would redo my resume and add a new job, that would sort of shrink to just a title, National Bank of Detroit, whatever my last title was. You don't have to give every detail. I would say people have too much, and it needs to be almost Twitter-like. So easy peasy, put it in Copilot or Chat GPT and just say, make this more concise. Because anything more than even 2 lines on a bullet is too much.
Yeah, it's interesting. The resumes, I was also in banking for a number of years, and to get resumes, and people would do the skills-based resume, or the mission. I'm looking for a position that will da 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 da, and we did call in references, and I think that's really important too, is to call and find out really how this person is as an employee. How do they work?
Yeah. Well, and as you're navigating your career, people are changing jobs more often. And I understand that. But if you do have a lot of jobs on your resume, employers still care, and that's still a red flag for them. So you've got to stay somewhere for 3 years. Somewhere at some point, or hopefully a job or so ago you were somewhere for 5 years or 7 years, because that you're going to work a lot harder finding a job, and hopefully you've accumulated some references who are great references.
Mm-hmm. And I would think even staying with the same corporation or company, and having different jobs within that, I would think that would be a strength.
Totally, yes. And sometimes we have to put the reason that we left roles. So a lot of us cut slack after COVID because we know that was a point in time people had to either voluntarily leave jobs or their jobs may have been reduced. So we understand that. And then we understand that some people maybe quickly took a job because they needed work. But now we're getting past that, where you should be settling in a bit. And, but things still happen. So on some of my career coaching clients' resumes, we actually put the reason maybe in parentheses, job, company acquired by X, or, workforce reduction due to X. Boss recruited me to, the next role. Because if you're leaving because your boss left and hired you away, that says something too.
Yeah, I've met several Lilly people who are coming to work for Lilly for the first time, and one of them was recruited by her boss who she had in Texas. He came first to Lilly, and then he's like, "Do you want to come to Indiana?" And she's like, "Sure, I do. My family lives in Illinois. I want to be closer to them." So, that's always nice when you have that situation happen too. When I had a staff for many years as a manager, and I know this from my own experience, that, I would always say, your skills are transferable. You may be in sales and think you're in bank sales or you're in boat sales, but you're still in sales, and your sales skills still transfer. Your communication skills still transfer. And I'd like to think, especially for me, that one thing has led to another, and that it's just been building on each other. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's going to be a lot of people who have the same skills. So the way you differentiate yourself really is, I hate to say it, but there's still a likability factor out there. When managers are hiring, there is some likability. And likability, this is just based on things I've read and heard, so it's not me knowing this for sure, can often be based on the warmth that you convey and your competence. So those are two things that can equate to sales and kind of likability too in the workplace. And emotional intelligence has really gained a lot of interest and traction, and they're just there's been tons of studies and white papers on how your EQ is much more critical to your success and your performance than your IQ.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I lost my train of thought on something I was thinking about. Oh, I know what it was. The person that I was talking to in a previous episode, who was going through a career crossroads, as he called it, it was quite popular because I think people could relate. They'd been in one career for a long time, and they were just, ready for something new. And do you see people like that, and it's a little harder to make that shift, but they know in their heart it's time to make a change.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into that. We have careers that are the hot career, like for a long time, going into accounting, working for a big public accounting firm, that was the career, right? And people sometimes chase the money or the glamour or whatever it is with certain careers. And often, a lot of times, people follow a career that maybe their parents were in. So, their mom or their dad was in finance, so they become a finance major. Well, sometimes they get into these roles and that's not really a good fit for them. They might stick it out for a long time, but at some point, if they're in the position and can afford to make that pivot, maybe they have a partner or financially they've prepared themselves to take more of a lateral move, because sometimes we do have to step back to move across and then up again. And so it's no longer the career ladder, it's the jungle gym. And yeah, and you can prepare for that. You could start taking some classes one at a time and really kind of prepare for that change. But you have to be realistic about what is the company going to see out of your resume too. As much as you want to work there and you can do the work there, that doesn't mean there aren't more qualified candidates out there for the company. So you've got to get yourself really in that position. And Susie, I'm sure you know this, but really 80% of your time is spent networking with any job. And you're much likely to hire someone that you know, even if it was in a slightly different setting. If I worked with someone on a PTO and I just thought the world of them, I'm going to give them a chance if it's a job that doesn't require subject matter expertise, maybe, than someone I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It is who you know.
It can be, or who you know who knows whoever else too, because people can apply to, back and not to date myself, but, we used to open up the envelopes and there'd be 3 or 4 resumes in there, maybe 20 or 25 for a whole job. Now there's could be 100 in a day for a job. Yeah.
I don't envy that person that has to go through that.
Well, and there's some software that can get it to a workable number, but it's just not possible to interview everyone who could actually perform the job well. So recruiters are stuck with, I'm going to look at industry experience. I'm going to look at the type of company they worked at. Like someone who worked at a Lilly is almost like a blessing. Like, wow, they made it past the Lilly filter. So I can expect a certain level of professionalism.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Based on either, your recruiting side or your coaching side, do you have any success stories, any recent ones that you would want to share?
Oh gosh.
Doesn't have to be many, just maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say from a career coaching standpoint, even when if I happen to like notice a job for someone, like I just saw someone was promoted who had been a teacher and found out right away, she was kind of fresh out of college, found out right away teaching was not going to be for her. And so we went through the whole process. And actually, you'll probably appreciate this. I did say, what have you thought about banking? And banking does a great job of training. They know how to do it. There's very clear career paths normally, decent hours, decent pay, good benefits,
Good skill
and it's
building.
great skill building. And
Mhm.
so she actually did interview at a bank, and I just saw, one of the LinkedIn posts, I've been promoted, you know. So I always get a kick out of that. And especially if I've made an introduction or something, they ultimately got the job, so I'm not going to take the credit for it. But it's fun if I do help facilitate that connection.
Very nice. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I would imagine. I was talking to someone who my friend met on a plane, and she said, you need to meet Susie." And so I met her, and we were talking about nonprofit, and she's now been in the same employer. When I met her, she was interviewing for that job. She's still there and has been promoted. And, I feel like that's a really good fit for her. And she was able to come to the conclusion that that's where she wanted to be. She wanted to be in the arts and the nonprofit section. So I love stories too like that. But Peggy, what holds most people back from finding success?
Mm. That's such a good one. Wow. Most people, I mean, I would have to say really their emotional intelligence, and that, I'm certified in EQI 2.0, and there's different versions. That's why I say that, because this EQI 2.0 has 5 skills and 3 sub skills for each of those. So there's 15 total skills. And I would say many, many, many things fall into your EQ that can hold you back. And if you have awareness around it, by either doing an assessment, reading up on it, or really thinking, getting feedback from people and taking that feedback seriously, it can really be a game changer.
Hmm. Um, I've done this book twice. I didn't have to read the book, but I did the test within the book twice. And I'm sure you know the book, and I can't remember the name, but it had several values, and it came up with 5 values, primary values of mine. And I did that twice, and there were some that were obviously overlapping, like a love of learning, and input and empathy. And really, I have never forgotten that. And it has been, I did it in 2021, and I did it years before in the 2000s. And I just find that stuff fascinating to see how far I have come along, but how true it is still a part of my value system and how important those values are where I work, how I work, who I am.
And some of those values you just mentioned too are really strengths. And so some of that is personality. Like we do a lot with Clifton strengths, and that's an assessment that I love too. And that is really who you are, but they're talents. And so it's really when you study them and put them into play and intentionally use them that they become strengths. And then EQ is not who you are. It's where you are right now, but you're still going to maybe, if you talk too much, interrupt people a lot, it's still probably a pattern that's there, but you can work on it. But some of them, like your self-regard, can change based on the circumstances. You know, if your partner just broke up with you out of the blue, your self-regard might have been great a month ago, and you might be in a moment where it's low. And so EQ is changeable, but your personality is kind of who you are. Doesn't mean you can't tweak things, of course, right?
As I was listening to you, it made me think, I think the book that I used was called The Strength Finder.
That probably was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. And Gallup owns that assessment now. So they have anyone can go online and get that assessment. It's like $20 for your top 5. The EQ assessment, I think there are some free versions out there, but the one that I do, you do have to be certified in because it's considered like a level B instrument. And sometimes people get their results and it's upsetting, actually. So you need someone to help talk you through it and kind of see the light and the possibilities.
That's a very good point. So along those lines, what are some keys to happiness for people?
Wow, boy, I love that question too. I hate to rely on the assessment, but there actually are some links in that assessment that we do to well-being and happiness, and they link them most strongly to interpersonal relationships, optimism, self-actualization, and on the board. What is it? Hang on. I gotta see if I have that. I just shoot. Self-regard. Okay, let me answer that part again. So on the EQI, it actually does have a link for some skills that highly relate to one's sense of well-being and happiness. So they say on the assessment that self-regard, optimism, self-actualization, and interpersonal relationships are the 4 areas, the 4 emotional intelligence skills that highly relate to happiness. And it makes sense. If your self-regard is low, how can you really be happy, right? You've got to feel good about what you're doing. And interpersonal relationships doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a ton. It's not the number. It's the quality and how happy you are with your interpersonal relationships. And then self-actualization is kind of one of those, I feel like it's one of those woo-woo words that nobody really knows what it means. But in this case, it really means, are you living the life that you thought you would live? Are you accomplishing the goals? So if you always pictured that you'd play the guitar, but you're always like, I'm so busy at work, I never get to take guitar lessons, your score might be lower, if you're not really living out your dreams. And so and optimism's just sort of an obvious one, I guess, if you're feeling optimistic about the world.
Hmm. I had a few people I would call in my former career, I would call Linus because they just seemed like a black cloud. And it was just like you didn't want to be around that person. They couldn't see anything positive about where they were. And that's hard on so many levels, interpersonally. Just it was just really hard to be friends with someone. At my age and stage in life, I view success differently. For a long time, it was I had to really just work, work, work all these hours. I didn't have children of my own, so I had more time, so I committed to more things, only to burn out. You know, but I thought that that's what I had to do, and I didn't have the role models to tell me that's not good for you. And that is, and my success, it cost me, and I think success has to constantly be redefined and defined personally for each individual. When I started the podcast, I would have said, yeah, I wanted to have so many subscribers and followers. But truly, the successes I've had in almost a year and a half, and that's a miracle and a great thing and a success and something to celebrate. It success means something different to me now at this stage.
Well, and I think, this has nothing to do with the assessments, but um, meaning, and I went through this big coaching program, and a couple people had said, that Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl was a book that they read every year, one person said. And so I was like, okay, I'm in a book club, and usually we read kind of fun, beachy kind of things and some serious things too. But I was like, okay, I'm going to find out what this is about. And I just started reading it, and it is a World War II, so there's some darkness there because it's a bit of a memoir of his experience, in a camp and whatnot too. But really, he was a psychologist, and so he observed what made people thrive and survive and what didn't. And, meaning, like having that meaning is maybe that's at the core.
Right. But and maybe people say, well, success to me is the nice car or the corner office or whatever it takes to get to be the CEO or whatever. And I think that the pandemic was a really good opportunity to reassess that. And I think I want to pivot too because right after the pandemic, I left one nonprofit for another one that was actually doing quite well, but they couldn't manage the new donors they had. So I was brought in as a major gifts officer. But so much of it was done over the computer or handwritten notes, not so much in person. But one of the things they did, they gave each employee a list, and it's the same list of the 7 factors that contribute to your happiness. And they wanted us to rank that and then share it with our immediate supervisor. Well, I was also kind of mentoring a young woman who's a friend of mine who's just starting off in her career. And I love that stage because they're just sponges and they're just, excited. But her ranking was so interesting. We shared our rankings with each other, and she valued a lot more work-life balance. It wasn't about the money and the title. It was a balance. She was very close to her family and wanted to have time off. And I just really appreciated hearing that.
I think time has become a luxury in and of itself, right? Like it's no different than the car you always wanted. Being able to work the hours you want to work. That's why that's become, in recruiting, it's, if you're not going to let someone work from home or have flexible hours or have more autonomy, then you have to pay them more. And it's an interesting shift, really.
It was fascinating, and she has moved up and moved on, and I'd be interested. I haven't seen her in a while, but I'd be interested to see what she would score now, a few years after this. But what, Peggy? What are your SOS? essence. What are those, small tips or skills or things people can do right now who are listening or watching this podcast, who are maybe in that one of those areas of their career that you've mentioned early on, to help move the needle forward for them? What could help them?
Oh gosh. I I mean, I do think from an SOS standpoint, well, let me ask a clarifying question, Susie. Are these supposed to be like start with an S?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, absolutely not. They can be just anything you see from your perspective that could help someone who's listening, besides call you or email you and reach out to you.
Yeah. So relative to their life or their career?
Career.
Okay. And not to say that they're, exclusive either or mutually exclusive. So I would say really just being a continuous learner, understanding the world, kind of understanding whatever subject matter or industry you're in, and just continuing to always develop yourself. So I know that's a big thing, continuous learning and all that, but I truly do feel like that is fuel and it gives you energy. So make sure to take time to develop, and that could be taking yoga classes or anything. It doesn't have to be, going and getting a CPA necessarily, but just learning, growing, joining a book club, those types of things. So that would be one. And I would also say just really focus on communication, because communication is the root of all good and evil, in my opinion. And I'm a talker, so easy for me to just blah, 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 right? I'm trying to grow my listening. I'm really working on that. I'm really working on asking open-ended questions and trying to help guide people to their answers versus me needing. I get a huge adrenaline rush to give somebody the answer and brainstorm, and I'm really trying to walk back on that. So I think communication, even when I coach people, it's the number one thing that comes up is some part of their communication that needs a little tweaking. So I would say a development, communication, and, really, again, I'm going to sound very woo-woo, but my husband hates the word intentional because he thinks everything is intentional, but he's in accounting, so that kind of makes sense, right? But really being intentional about how you're spending your time, who you're spending your time with, being really conscious in as many situations as you can of what's going on around you, even what's going on inside of you, naming those emotions. Am I angry or am I frustrated right now? Or am I embarrassed? That's really critical to be able to move to problem solving. And so, yeah, those would be my three.
Those are great three. In fact, those are great threes regardless of your career. I mean, they're just really good tips. And one of the ladies I've interviewed twice, she's a family therapist, and her SOS the first time around was, when I asked her what her tip was, she said, ask for what you want, not for what you don't. And I wrote that down, and I have thought about that, even with my friends. If I really don't want to go somewhere, instead of saying, sure, I'll go, I'll say, oh, I really don't because, or, I just think it was a great tip for any relationship I have.
But that, Susie, is communication, because it's framing it, right? It's framing it in a way that's ultimately going to probably be more effective because people aren't going to get their bristle up. And a real quick tip like that I learned, and I wish I would have known as a parent, and a lot I wish I would have known as a parent. Everyone should go through a coaching curriculum before they parent. Is really even the slight difference between why and what. Instead of why you did, when people say, why did you do that? We go on the defense versus hey, walk me through your thought process on this, on this project? Or how did you approach this project? It's so different.
It is, because why sounds more critical. Like, why
It
did you do
does.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I like to ask for what you want, though. That I think that's fabulous.
Mhm. It really is. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us that we didn't get a chance to talk about? Anything else?
Oh gosh. I just think with it, I don't know, maybe we did, but with regard to career, keeping the conversation going. And when you're networking, and networking is a word that makes so many people cringe, but it's really just talking to people and learning from them. Those are how those opportunities are really going to come to you. They're not really going to be from an ad on Indeed. So keep your relationships positives, never burn a bridge, and have those conversations. Always keep people in your network. You don't have to call them 10 years from now because they're connected to a job. You have a cup of coffee, a message on LinkedIn, happy birthday on LinkedIn.
I love it. Peggy, where can people find you if they want to talk to you further?
They can find me. My email is Peggy at Purple Ink. That's with a K, LLC.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well in the Indianapolis area. But yeah.
And I will have your contact information in the description in the podcast. So if people need that too, it'll be there. So this has been a great time with you, and I've learned a lot, and you've confirmed a lot about careers and where we are today and what employers are looking for, and how we can help people of all different ages, how you can help people of all different ages on their career journey.
Well, it's been great chatting with you, and I hope it helps some people. There also are a ton of free resources out there that people can get to, and I'm always happy to help. So,
Well, thank you for being on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And I know our paths will cross again. So thanks again.
wow, thanks.
Well, friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening or watching SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And thank you, Peggy, for joining me today. I'm so appreciative that Peggy joined me to talk about career. Career is one of the many things that lead to our joy, and we spend so much time at a job. And it's always important to understand, the whys are why we're doing it, and do we enjoy it? And sometimes we make pivots, whether we want to or it's thrust upon us. And part of those pivots can be your career. And so Peggy gives some great advice to helping people through those changes and really getting down in the weeds to, what skills you have and what you can bring to the organization that's seeing hundreds of resumes, and what will make your LinkedIn page stand out, and how can you grow as a person and be a better employee. So thank you, Peggy, for being there and being here, and we'll look forward to many more conversations. And a quick reminder on how you can support this podcast. You can like, share, and subscribe. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and you can certainly reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk to you further if you have any ideas for future podcast conversations. And until next time, take care, and I hope our paths cross again.